Well, hello. Let me pull this in. I have been getting ready for the big storm that's supposed to be upon us. In some places, it's going to start tonight. And so I will be praying for you. And let's just do it right now. Dear Lord, please be with everyone across America who is going to be in the wake of this storm and the ice and the snow. Please keep them warm and protect them. Let us reach out to our neighbors and make sure that they are okay, and let this draw us closer to each other and you, and just protect us during this time. Thank you, Lord. Amen. So I have spent all day watching grandchildren and getting ready, and I didn't know what to do because everybody I've talked to here says they're crazy. There's not going to be any problems. Just don't worry about it. Everything's going to be fine. Just get an extra couple of things to eat. So, and then you hear I follow this guy named Ryan Hall, y'all, and he's a weatherman on YouTube, and I think he's pretty good. But boy, I mean, he says there are places that could be weeks without electricity. And anyway, so that's very interesting, as I don't know which to believe. I'm from Texas, and from Dallas, Texas. And I have been through lots of tornadoes in that area. Been through one that went right over our house when I was a young kid, and we all were I got my sisters and brothers, and we put them all in the bathtub with a mattress over the top. And then I've been in hurricanes. Now the hurricanes have been the more interesting ones. One of them was, we were in Florida, and we went through a cat 4 and 5 there, both cat 4 and a cat 5. One was in Pensacola, and another one was, you know what? I can't remember where the other one was. I think it might have been in New Bern, North Carolina. I think we went through a pretty good one there. And then we used to live in California, where there were earthquakes. And so we've been through a couple of earthquakes there. So I feel like I've gotten a broad range of nature's disasters. And this was the only one that's got me concerned, because I don't want to be cold. I don't want to be cold. So we'll just have to see how that goes. I think we're going to be all right, though. God's going to take care of us. And we've been very prepared, because I think God expects us to prepare. Okay, so last week on Friday, we started reading. I do not know if this superimposes it or twists it around, but this is my book that I wrote called Mission Vatican. And it's the first of a trilogy. And so the first, last week, I read what I call the prelude. I know it's a musical term, but that's what I have my degree in vocal performance and music, and I have a minor in conducting. And so anyway, all right. So now we went through the prelude and went through partly through chapter 1. And so we're back in chapter 1, I think this page 10. Now that is the book. You can get it online, and I don't know where that would be, but so last time, Pastor Ken Kirk had a nurse who was working overtime and ended up falling asleep on the highway going home, and she went right off the highway, right on top of Ken Kirk's house, which was sitting way too close to the highway. And she, boom, went over and hit his roof and caved his roof in. And so the police are at his house, and of course, all the fire trucks and the ambulances. And so there's this big hubbub, and all of his parishioners heard, because everybody's texting, you've got to come over here. And it's a little small community in Cleburne, Texas. So they're all showing up and teasing Ken Kirk. The girl is fine. She's fine. So now it's become a kind of a circus there. Okay, so we're going to start at the top of 10, and we're going to just read a couple of sentences that we already read. Pastor Ken was getting tired of the bustle and saw that his one chair, still sitting on his yellow lawn, was now empty. But he couldn't sit on it when there were so many ladies all around standing. Under the circumstances, he offered it to them. A face caught Ken's attention. An insurance agent, Theodore Beza, a bear of a man with dark eyes and curly black hair, walked towards Ken with his familiar toothy grin. Called Teddy for short, Mr. Beza's hand slapped against his left cheek as he strove for a witty enough comment to fit the situation. Yet all that came from him was a teasing, resonant chuckle. The group surrounding the pastor allowed no cut-in conversations, so for a couple of tries at talking to Ken, Theodore Teddy Beza began walking around the house, assessing the damage. Warned not to enter, Teddy peered through the window and was confounded to see that the exposed load-bearing studs were spaced more than 24 inches apart, a far greater distance than today's code. When the house creaked, Teddy expected that at any second, this place would crash. He stepped back a few paces and scribbled some notes using the word condemn. iPhones were snapping pictures at the humorous spectacle. Repressed smirks burst out on many faces as they tried to figure out if it was polite to laugh. An older man with white whiskers and wearing overalls casually stepped over the insurance agent with a bit, over to the insurance agent with a bit of a chuckle. Teddy knew the man as Mr. Waldo Wagner. What a miracle! What a miracle! The man stuck out his hand to Teddy, who assumed that the old man was talking about how the roof had saved the young nurse's life. But that wasn't it. Mr. Wagner's thoughts were interrupted. Well, how are you this exciting morning, Mr. Wagner? Teddy asked. Though everyone in Cleburne was on a first-name basis, no one ever called Mr. Wagner by Waldo. The kids thought it was because he hated his first name, while some of them knew that it was more respectful to call your elders by Sir or Mr. And Waldo Wagner, in his 80s, was old enough to have always been the elder to everyone in this group. Mr. Wagner didn't worry about formalities and didn't answer Teddy's question. He continued his thoughts. Can you imagine? Mr. Wagner picked his teeth with his pinky finger. That old house. He shook his head with enjoyment. Finally, being the thing that saves him. God works in mysterious ways. Him? Save him? Teddy Beza wondered what Mr. Wagner could mean. Did he mean that it was a miracle that the roof didn't collapse under the weight of the heavy sports car and kill their pastor? Before Teddy could ask the older gentleman a question, their thoughts were interrupted. Above them, an official government escort was approaching on the highway. The police stopped all traffic as the crane positioned itself on the overpass. Cars pulled off the highway. Some passengers slipped over the guardrail and gathered at the slope to watch the spectacle. A man in a safety harness, suspended from the crane, secured some large nylon straps underneath the car. Eyes darted towards the mesmerized and perspiring owner of the vehicle as the Dodge Daytona 500 was hoisted up and carefully placed upon the ground. A thunder of yells and claps came from the audience. Amazingly, there were no more than a couple of scratches. The owner, aware of his momentary celebrity, thanked Ken for the use of his roof with a flourished bow, leaped into Old Reb, turned on the keys, and it immediately began its smooth, throaty rumble. Perfect. Everyone cheered as the nurse's husband revved the engine a couple more times and then took off. An American flag sticker on the Daytona's rear window sill blazing in the morning sun became the finale to the morning's entertainment. The morning's events seemed to be over, and there were farms to be tended to, hunger and thirst to be satisfied, and jobs to begin. As the crowd scattered, the insurance agent, Teddy Beza, stopped another man he knew, Richard Munzer. Richard Munzer stood rather stiffly, eyeing the entire scene with pleasure. Richard was known not only for being short, but also being a particular and hard-headed client. Surveying the peasants, Teddy teased as he walked towards Munzer. Huh? Munzer's face deliberately grew congenial as soon as he saw Teddy. You had a look on your face as if you're about to whip us all us peasants into some type of rebellion, Mr. Beza commented. No, Munzer replied, confused by Teddy's comments. No, I'm actually thinking about the situation. The pastor, he seems to always get himself in some ridiculous situation. It's rather embarrassing. Not embarrassing. Own embarrassment of the. It's quite amazing. It's because his pastor. I read it wrong. Sorry. I'm embarrassed about his pastor. It's quite amazing, really. Can you imagine? Wow, that girl was really lucky. Teddy stood side by side with Richard Munzer, gazing at the broken home. Without a doubt, I hope she wasn't that tired when she was taking care of her patients, Richard retorted snidely with a high-pitched voice, holding himself straight as a board and without the slightest trace of a southern drawl. He suggested, but she wasn't the only one that Lady Luck smiled upon. Yeah, can you believe? That car was perfect, Teddy returned. That was amazing indeed, Richard responded, then pawed his chin. But I was, in fact, referring to Pastor Ken Kirk. The miracle is just as truly his. Teddy looked at Richard's dark expression and decided that Richard wasn't very happy about this miracle. Absolutely, pronounced Theodore Beza. That's a heavy car. It should have gone right through that roof of that old, well, let's just be honest. It's almost a shack. That's not what I meant, Richard corrected Teddy. They both stood there as Richard pondered whether he should say anything about what he knew. He didn't want to sound unkind, but he might not be a good enough actor to conceal his disdain for the pastor and his crazy ideas. I meant that Pastor Kirk has always been trying to procure some funding for the man hesitated, then smiled broadly with a hint of mockery. Well, let's say his project. However, you better ask him concerning the details. Richard wouldn't tell the insurance assessor about Ken's situation. Richard excused himself, looking around as if adding more to the evidence he was amassing against his pastor, gave a judgmental smirk, then strutted to his vehicle. His head shook in disappointment behind the driver's seat. His head shook in disapproval. This thing is in my way. Okay, let me see if I can find a way it won't. Okay, let's try this. His head shook in disapproval behind the driver's side window as he slowly pulled his car away, trying not to stir up dust. Richard awakened the insurance agent's curiosity, and Ted thought, what's going on? What is about money? How? He would have to ask the pastor himself. Uh-oh, Teddy took a deep breath. He spotted Calvin over by the pastor and knew that there would be no way he could get back to work anytime soon. Calvin was a storyteller, a great guy, and Teddy really liked him. But it took him 3 times as long as anyone else to make a point. He'd have something to say for sure this morning. Teddy prepared himself as he walked over to the pastor. Pastor Ken was listening sheepishly to the police chief, arguing with Calvin, who was the head elder of his church. Calvin was an entertainer, and his voice was loud. Calvin Philip Schwarzert, smiling as he gesticulated his thoughts, considered himself devilishly handsome, even though he was of average height, and the years had given him a few extra pounds. And indeed, he'd always been handsome, especially in his youth. Even now, his thick silver hair that began at his forehead and cascaded back like perfectly manicured waves made many people take a second look. He had light brown eyes, always sparkling with mischief, and 2 dimple lines on each cheek when he smiled that triangulated with the dimple in his chin. The ladies, from senior citizens to young girls, were beguiled by Calvin's charm, and he knew it, which gave him a swaggering confidence that most men lack. Just as no one ever called Mr. Wagner by his first name, no one ever called Calvin by his last name. Some thought that was because Calvin hated his last name, but the real reason was because it was so unpronounceable. When Calvin did say it, he relished saying it in the most dramatic of accents. Calvin P. Schwartz. Everyone knew that Calvin didn't care how it was really pronounced. It was simply too entertaining when the elementary school kids pulled on his jacket and begged him to say his name. They would run off giggling, "Mr. Schwartz." Calvin laughed. Calvin, who had practically run the church for 4 decades, and was Ken's dearest friend, considered it his responsibility to constantly interfere with everything Ken was doing. After all, he had been the head elder of the church for 3 pastors, Ken being the latest. Calvin was a conspiracy theorist about anything when it came to the government, and Calvin was there analyzing what the police were saying to the pastor in an attempt to figure out exactly what they were up to. He was going to make certain Pastor Ken would not have to pay for any of this rescue effort, into which he was certain Ken would be roped. Teddy's thoughts when Thomas Cramner, a fireman, grabbed the insurance agent's hand. "Howdy, Teddy," Cramner yelled. "You're late." The investigator had already come.